I would be willing to bet that there's a behavior somewhere in your life that you've been trying to change for a long time. Maybe it's smoking or drinking, or it could be eating things that you know you shouldn't, or even going to the gym, or maybe even avoiding a hard conversation that you just keep putting off. And most of us have noticed something, which is that willpower doesn't work for that long. It's not the be-all and end-all conclusion, because our discipline eventually runs out. What I want to share with you is a model for how behavioral change actually works. And what I want to show you is the version of what I think is really happening underneath the scenes of our behaviors. For most of us, the way that we've been taught to think about behavior change goes something along these lines, which is you decide you want to change, you make a plan, you exercise willpower until the new behavior sort of becomes automatic. And if you fail, the assumption is that you didn't want it badly enough, or you weren't disciplined enough. And inside, we tell ourselves a story like, maybe I wasn't good enough, or maybe there's something wrong with me, or maybe I'm broken. What I want to suggest to you is that this entire frame is wrong, and it's the wrong way of thinking about it. Because what's actually shifting when a behavior changes permanently is something far deeper. It's more architectural, and frankly, it's much more interesting than discipline. What changes fundamentally is your identity. And the behavior, more or less, just follows as a natural consequence of that identity. So let me start with a quick thought experiment for you. I want you to think of somebody you know who is naturally just the kind of person who does the thing that you've been trying to do. Going back to that behavior that you're looking to change. The person who doesn't have to maybe negotiate with themselves to go to the gym. Or the person who can just say no to a drink without it being any kind of a big deal or having internal struggle about it. Or the person who's actually able to handle the hard conversation without spending a week dreading its anticipation. Now, I want you to notice something about them. They aren't doing that thing through willpower. They aren't exercising more discipline than you, and the behavior isn't some kind of a fight for them. It fits who they are. So what's actually different about them? I'm going to suggest that what's different isn't their willpower at all. It's their identity. The version of themselves that they're currently being makes that behavior become automatic. And once you understand the fundamental mechanism underneath that, I promise you're going to be able to stop trying to brute force change yourself. And you're going to begin to be able to start actually engineering this change. So this model I call the identity circuit, which it's not a completely brand new model. It's based on the foundations of everything I've learned, but I think it's a new way of thinking about it. So here's what's really happening. In every influence interaction that produces real change, I want you to imagine a graph with 2 points on it. One point on this graph is going to be your identity. And by identity, by the way, I mean the version that you're currently being, which is your needs and your decisions, your values, the role that you're playing in your own story. The other point is a behavior, which could be any behavior in the world. We could be looking at smoking, going to the gym, asking your partner the hard question, closing that big business deal. It really doesn't matter. Between those 2 points, what I want you to see is that your identity and a behavior, there are 4 connections, so 4 flowing connections between them. And there are 2 different states the behavior can be in. During the behavior, when you're actually in the middle of doing it, and not during, which is every other moment, including when you're anticipating it or remembering it. And inside of each of those 2 states, there are essentially 2 emotional connections to the behavior. There is a positive connection, which is the good feelings tied to it, and a negative connection, which is the bad feelings tied to it. And both of these connections, always, for every single behavior and every person, are always occurring at any given time. So drinking has the anticipation, or the relief, the social ease that we feel. But it also has the hangover and sometimes the regret or the feeling of maybe slipping into something that you don't want to be the next morning. So going to the gym has accomplishment as well, right? It has a clarity that we feel. And it also, though, has a dread sometimes, or a fatigue, or a muscle pain or soreness associated with working out. And if we look at our other example, we're kind of tracking here. If we're asking our partner a hard question, again, it has a relief of finally getting something off our chest, being vulnerable, being completely open. But it also has the fear of what comes next and how they might react to that. So what I want you to see is that every single behavior that human beings have at all times is always carrying both of these polarities, both before, during, and after. Now, here's the part that actually matters. What changes between two different versions of you or two different identities is not whether those four connections exist, because the four connections always are existing for all people with all behaviors. What actually changes is their relative volume proportional to each other. So for one identity, the positives generally are loud and the negatives are almost a quiet background noise. Then the behavior happens for a different identity, but the same person. The negatives are loud and the positives have gone quiet in this circumstance. So what I want you to see is the chemistry didn't disappear, only the volume on each of those four connections. What was loud goes quiet, and sometimes what was quiet gets loud. And the behavior simply changes, not because the person decided to change, but because from the new identity, the math on the four connections is now completely different. That's what's actually underneath every single meaningful behavior change that you've ever witnessed. The friend who finally got out of that relationship that was crushing them, or the version of yourself maybe that you used to be that you no longer recognize. If we even just look at the colleague who transformed their entire career trajectory after one seemingly benign conversation, on the surface at least, it wasn't their willpower, and it had nothing to do with their motivation. And it even wasn't some new system or some fancy, amazing plan that they had. What happened is their identity shifted, and as a result, their decisions just started doing the rest automatically. So here's what you can start using. And I want to give you something that you can use right now on any behavior that you've been trying to change in yourself, or maybe in someone that you genuinely really care about. I have 3 questions for you. 1, where is the identity right now? Not where you wish it was, where is it actually sitting? What social needs or what decisions or values or what archetypal story is the person inside of right now that's creating this identity? Take a person who's been trying to quit drinking, for example. They're not drinking because they want a hangover. They're drinking because their current identity is somebody who hasn't yet learned an actual real way to cope with stress or social anxiety or whatever the actual underlying trigger is. And that's the location of that identity. Question number 2, where does the identity need to go? So what's the new version of the person who would naturally not need this behavior anymore, or who would naturally choose a better behavior automatically without having to force anything? And question number 3 is, what's the most efficient path from where the identity is to where it actually needs to be? When you start thinking about behavior change this way, willpower is going to stop being the center of the conversation, because the center becomes the identity movement, and the tools, the meditation, the therapy, coaching, training, whatever it is that you choose to do is just the surface. If you want to go way deeper on what actually makes up an identity and how to change it, we do have tons of courses at NCI University about exactly this. But for now, I want you to remember that you're not trying to force a behavior. All you're doing is trying to relocate the person who would do that behavior automatically. And that most of the things that you've been trying to fix about yourself, maybe through discipline, that there might be a faster way. And this is not because discipline is wrong. It's because at some point, the person that you're trying to be isn't going to need to fight that behavior anymore. They're just finally going to become somebody who doesn't do it, or somebody who does the better thing automatically. And the real work is actually just moving this identity. And from there, your decisions or your choices, your behaviors, all will start to fall perfectly in line with that new identity automatically. And I want to leave you with one last thing. What we walk through in this video, as I said earlier, is genuinely just the entry point to a much larger model called the full identity circuit. And the diagnostic tools we use to actually engineer this kind of movement in other people, and how to identify it in ourselves and what the identity is actually made up of, all lives inside the NCI University grad school curriculum, specifically within inside the school. So if any of this resonated with you and you would like to go deeper, I just want you to know that that's the place. But for now, what I want you to do is to pick one behavior, just one, which is the thing that you've been trying to change for too long, and ask yourself those 3 questions to see where your identity is currently sitting and then where it needs to be. And if nothing else, I hope that you can just remember this one thing, which is don't force the behavior, move the identity, and all of the actions will follow as a natural result of that. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I'll see you on the next one.
I know this probably isn't what you plan to watch right this second, but if you give me a minute, this might be one of the most useful things that you will ever hear. Most people in your life that you know are listening to just words, but behavior doesn't come from words. It comes from what's underneath all of those words. At NCI level 2, you're going to start seeing that layer. All of the motives, the incentives, the drivers, pressure, all the stress and deception. You don't just hear what somebody says, you understand why they're saying it. And you can predict behavior before it happens. You can spot what's real and what isn't. And that changes every interaction you have. I have seen this change thousands of lives, and I feel compelled to tell you about it. I at least want you to check it out. So once you see this level of reality, you're not going to go back. This is NCI level 2. The link is right down there in the description.